time to cook with Susan Beck, and I am going to make a new recipe, Cheesy Mexican Meatloaf. I found this recipe in the Wisconsin State Journal 2 weeks ago and thought, wow, this sounds really good, and it's just a nice twist on meatloaf to make it something different. I have my very favorite meatloaf made with stovetop stuffing. I'll be sure to post a link for that below because that is definitely a hit. I make it a lot for company and my family absolutely loves it. But I will say this meatloaf was really good too. It features Poblano peppers that have been roasted. You can use Poblano peppers or you can use Anaheim peppers. In my case, we don't have Anaheim peppers in our grocery store, so Poblano it is. But they're very similar, either one would do. We'll have some onions, we're gonna have some fresh garlic, and let's have a look at all these other fantastic ingredients because there's a lot of things going into this Mexican meatloaf. In addition to our fresh produce, we will be using a large egg, a cup of milk, and 1 cup of breadcrumbs. I have dried today, but you can use fresh breadcrumbs just as easily in this recipe. This is going to feature some cheese. I am going to use a 4-cheese Mexican blend, but you could use just Monterey Jack cheese or a pepper jack cheese even. And if all you have is cheddar, go for it. We'll have a little Worcestershire chili powder. We have some cumin, salt, pepper, oregano, and cilantro. And then when we get ready to top this, we will be using some brown sugar and some ketchup and a little bit more chili powder. As for the meat in my meatloaf, I am using a combination of ground meats. I have ground venison mixed with ground pork, and I also have a pound of ground beef. Now you can make this with any combination you want, or you can just stick with ground beef if you prefer, but I'm always looking for ways to use some of that venison, and this is an excellent way to put it to use. Well, to start off here, I'm going to finish chopping up my garlic into some smaller pieces here. I've already chopped my onions fairly well, and these are going to go onto the stovetop and saute for a bit. I'm going to put my onions in first and let them get a little more translucent and on that softer side. Then I will add my garlic and cook it for probably just like 1 minute more because the garlic will cook faster and it's more apt to burn or brown or turn black on me and stick to the bottom of my skillet, and we don't want that. Now the peppers have already been roasted, and as I said, I had a video last week that you can view on how to roast peppers. And since those have already been softened up nicely under my broiler, they don't really need to go into my saute. I turned my burner to medium heat, and I'm just going to drizzle some olive oil in the bottom to coat the bottom of that pan. And then we'll go my onions first. While my onions cook, I'm going to go ahead and get my Poblano peppers diced up here. Run a knife through them and make some smaller pieces. Now it's optional on whether or not you want to remove the skins, which is what you do when you roast them under your broiler, is you get them nice and brown and charred where you can peel off some of that outer skin that's a little bit tougher, and then you get down to just that nice meaty flesh. It gives it a smoky flavor, and I think it maybe adds just a little bit of sweetness to the peppers as well. But again, completely optional. And then I'm going to add to them my garlic. I like to stir it a bit to make sure that garlic's not sticking to the bottom or getting too brown on one side. Last step on the top of the stove is to add a little Worcestershire. Now the purpose of that is to deglaze the pan. It'll pick up any of those little brown bits of onion or garlic that did stick down. So just a little splash of Worcestershire, and we're good. The first thing I'm going to put into my bowl are my breadcrumbs, and then I'm going to pour the milk over top of those, and that will just kind of soften those breadcrumbs up while I work on my other ingredients. We're going to crack 1 egg. I like to do that in a separate bowl and give it a little whisking here and break it up a bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and put that egg right. Then it's just a matter of mixing everything in here together. So I'm going to go ahead put in my onions and garlic, add in that Poblano pepper as well. Along with all of my spices, I am going to be using a tablespoon of chili powder. And then we'll switch to the teaspoon, and we will use 2 teaspoons of cumin, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of oregano, 1 teaspoon of cilantro, and a teaspoon of ground black pepper. I'm gonna go ahead and do my meat next and kind of break it up a little bit as I put it in. I do want to make sure that I get, my 2 different kinds of meats kind of mixed together well, so it's not, like, oh, it's venison on this side and ground beef on the other side. I've got my beef in there, and then I also need 1.5 cups of this Mexican cheese. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball that, but feel free to measure it if you want to. Now the best way to mix meatloaf is, I'm going to remove my ring here, is just to use your hands and get right in there. I want to make sure I get some of those seasonings in with all parts of the meat and get this well mixed together. At the same time, I don't really want to overwork my meat. It just kind of, I don't know, it gets to be kind of like a hard solid blob if I do. So I kind of like to keep it a little bit more on the light and fluffy side. So there's my meatloaf. It's got some beautiful color to it with that Poblano pepper mixed in there and that yellow cheese, although that's gonna all melt, obviously. Okay, time to put it in the pan. Now this is a very large meatloaf in that it's got 2 pounds of meat in it, and if you don't want to make that much, it is a very, very easy recipe to cut into half. Make a half a batch, just use 1 pound of ground beef, a half a cup of your breadcrumbs, use 3/4 cup of cheese, and reduce it down to a size that is better for you and your family. In my case though, I am going to make 2 different meatloaves, and I am going to freeze one. That's another option if you don't want to make so much, is to make 2 different containers. The one I put in the freezer, I'll just put some cellophane and foil over that and wrap it up well, and I feel like I can leave it in there for a couple months even. All right, so I've greased my pans, just makes for easier cleanup, and then I am going to add this mixture into these pans. For the topping, we're gonna mix together half a cup of ketchup. I love this adjustable measuring cup for those sticky kind of things because it slides right out and you get all of it. Got half a cup also of brown sugar, and then I'm going to use more chili powder. I'm going to use 2 teaspoons of chili powder in my topping. Just stir that all together. I love the mixture of the tang from the ketchup with that brown sugar sweetness. This just makes a lovely glaze for the top of the meatloaf. It's very similar to the glaze I use on my stovetop stuffing meatloaf, in that one is just brown sugar and ketchup. There is no chili powder. So a little twist on it to make it, I guess, fit with our Mexican meatloaf is to put the chili powder not only in the meat, but also in that glaze. Well, this meatloaf is off to the oven to cook at 350 degrees for probably 50 to 60 minutes. It's definitely got some Mexican flavors with that chili powder and that cumin. I can really taste both of those things, and those peppers are just so soft and tender after roasting them, and I love the gooiness of that cheese in there as well. I always loved my other meatloaf, but now I've got 2 meatloaf recipes that I truly, truly love. Try Cheesy Mexican Meatloaf.